Hey, welcome to Mind Your Own Biz, the podcast where we help small business owners with big dreams build something authentically you. I'm Alicia Yervis, educator, marketer, designer, nacho enthusiast, and your big sister in business. I'm excited for us to have this cozy spot to chat. Each episode, we'll tackle candid conversations, actionable tips, and a few fun tangents to help you run your business your way. Because business is always personal, no matter what anyone says. So grab your iced coffee or those nachos, and let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mind Your Own Biz. My name is Alicia Yervis. I am your host, and I'm so happy spring is finally in the air. Yesterday was the first day of spring, and I don't know about you, but this season always makes me want to just refresh everything. My space, my energy, obviously my business as well. I was working with ChatGPT yesterday to help me come up with a doable, realistic plan for decluttering my apartment and cleaning and all of that stuff. With the ADHD, it makes it difficult to figure out the right steps in the right order and like how can I tackle this in a reasonable way that won't have me ripping my hair out. Also, don't forget that a few episodes back, if you listen to my episode with Whitney, she gave us a whole plan on Whitney Walsh, I should say. She gave us a whole plan on how to tackle decluttering and organizing our workspace. So like I have that to start with, and boy, do I need it because my desk is a cluttered mess. So revisit that episode when you get a chance. It is a great chat with her. And that was actually episode number 10. So the episode is called Making Room for Creativity, Organizing Your Workspace and Life with Whitney Walsh. So definitely give that a listen. So that's going to be my starting point. But also then ChatGPT was helping me tackle the whole rest of my apartment. So spring just has me feeling that way. And so if you're feeling that urge to hit reset and bring some new life into your brand and into your social media content, your marketing, all that kind of stuff, I've got two awesome tools to help you with that right now. So the first I want to mention is a free guide that I have on my website, which is called Your Website, Your Personality. And what it is, it's a free guide that includes 25 ways to infuse more of your unique personality into your website. But you could also take inspiration from that and use it for your marketing, your social media content, your blogs, your emails, your podcasts, your videos. You'll get all kinds of ideas from that freebie. It's just a quick and fun guide that helps you put more of yourself into your marketing so that you can infuse or so that you can attract more of those dream clients who just totally vibe with you and your energy. Because your website shouldn't feel like a bland business card, it should be like a party invite to your brand. And so you can grab it for free in the show notes of this episode. But if you're listening, just head to aliciayervis.com/your website personality. So the link will be in the show notes. You can grab it from there. And the other is my 2025 social media content calendar. And it's on sale right now for just $9. So it's a perfect opportunity to grab it to finish out the rest of the year strong. And if you're just tired of staring at the blinking cursor every time you try to come up with your social media posts, like I've got you. So this calendar, I publish one every year and it maps out the entire year. It's full of social media content ideas, dates for you to be aware of, just like different strategy notes and ideas and stuff to help you show up consistently without burning out. It's fully customizable. You can, customize and change things up to your liking. And it's only $9 right now. It's on sale. So it's designed for real people running real businesses. And you can grab it right now at the link in the show notes. So make sure you head there and grab it. And speaking of refreshing and showing up, today's guest is someone who's all about helping you do just that, especially when it comes to your unique voice. So let's get into it. I am very excited today to welcome Radhika Lucas. Radhika Lucas is a writer, speaker, and a purpose-driven founder dedicated to empowering women to find their true voice and grow their impact and influence. With a combined 20 years in advertising and marketing in local and international markets, Radhika combines her education marketing experience with her prior experience in behavior change, theater, and effective speaking to help individuals bridge the gap between what they stand for with how they show up. Her mission is to amplify women's voices by showcasing real stories of individuals who have found their voice in their purpose, despite hurdles, to be seen and heard with confidence. Radhika works at the University of Auckland, is the founder of Content Halo, and host of the Hidden to Heard podcast. She has lived and worked across APAC and currently lives in Auckland, New Zealand. So please join me in welcoming Radhika Lucas. So, hello, my friend. Thank you so much, Radhika, for being on the podcast. I just introduced my audience to you. I read through your very impressive bio. I love that you're joining us from New Zealand. That's very exciting as well. um, and I just want to say first that I think it's so cool because you've had such a unique and multi-layered journey to get where you are, like from theater, just like me. I come from a theater background, so I love that connection,
Yeah.
into advertising, into coaching. Can you kind of walk us through your story and how it all came together to create your brand Content Halo?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I'm really excited to be here. And as you can tell, I am trying to match your very bright branding. So I hope I've done a good job there.
I love
But
it.
look, but look, I mean, talking about my journey to get here, I think, it's important for people to realize who are watching this. I mean, finding your true voice is really about aligning with yourself. And so that's what I have done pretty much, all along. Hasn't always been perfect, but the journey to get here has been many and varied. And so, taking a little trip down memory lane is that I started my stage and theater performance actually on the street. So I grew up in
Mm.
India, and we didn't get given a lot of pocket money or anything. And so in the summer holidays, me and my cousin used to get together, and of course, back then this was the 1980s. We didn't really have a lot to do outside of making our own fun, right? So
Hmm.
but the only thing was there were new release videos that were coming out and we couldn't afford to buy them or couldn't afford to rent them. And so what we ended up doing was we ended up knocking door to door and performing these little skits that we'd just created and ended up getting a little, small sums of money. And I think the journey kind of started from there. So it started from there and then it built up. And then I created my own production with my friends that I used to meet out every evening. We'd play together, and I came up with a street production. I invited every single person that lived around the area to watch this production. We had some adults help us with building the stage and things like that. I ended up being the model on a fashion show that I'd created. And so, I think that the journey to being visible kind of started much earlier on in my life.
Hmm.
And I think that I created from a place of abandon as only a child would. Usually children don't have that fear. You don't have those inhibitions that we tend to have as we start moving into adulthood. And then
Yeah.
and then what ended up happening was because my mum saw that I was really involved and interested in street performance and theater, and I was doing a lot of it myself, she ended up channeling me into elocution, speech and drama, and effective speaking. And
Mm.
so my serious journey kind of started from there because I got a lot more involved in then stage productions. So involved, through school and outside of school. And so the ability to take something from nothing was kind of to create something from nothing was really created much earlier on in my life. And I kind of feel like where I am now is really just coming a full circle to what started back in my childhood. It's just that it's represented in a completely different way. And so now what I'm doing is I'm actually helping people leverage their own true voice because every one of us has our own true voice of life experiences, our journeys, whatever that might be. And for me, that was a whole bunch of things. I mean, it was the fact that I was as I moved into womanhood and, as soon as I hit 21 almost, miraculously, I kind of lost that ability to just be myself.
Mm.
And I felt like I had these external pressures that I started observing, this need to constantly be perfect. Even though I wasn't always a perfectionist, but I felt like I needed to have this persona that needed to please everyone. And so I kind of put it akin to, when you see a big cliff face and the cliff face is being battered by all of these winds and rain and the seas, and it just ends up getting eroded over a period of time.
Mm,
And before you know it,
mhm,
the cliff face has completely changed what it looked like at the very beginning. And I think
mhm,
we as individuals, as people, are kind of like that cliff face where we might be being hit by many different challenges that we ourselves have faced along the journey. And
mhm,
in that process, we can either end up losing our voice that we once had. So it could be the journey of, that someone is quite confident speaking one-on-one, this kind of format. They might be okay speaking, in person even. But somewhere along the line, when it comes to actually holding and owning their own story, suddenly there's a blockage. Suddenly there's a need to kind of go, oh, I don't really know how to articulate what I do. And I think,
mhm,
we all individually have those varying aspects of, the thing that we carry. And I think it's really, for me, has been aligning with what I stand for in my true core essence of who I am as a person, and then molding that to every single instance and creation that I have. And so, so my journey has been one of having gone through cancer. So I've got a cancer journey.
mm. Wow.
I've been in a lot of pain for about 2.5 years. I wasn't able to pick up my own children for 2.5 years. I
Wow.
found out on my son's first birthday. I
Oh.
went through quite a process, and there was a fair bit of workplace bullying and all of that. But along the way, I kind of realized that, hang on a minute, who is the common denominator in all of these things?
Mhm,
Why am I the one who is being bullied? Why am I the one who is, who's going through this cancer journey? Why am I the one who is, having all of these things happen to me? Right? Because we kind of through that process start questioning, well, why me? And I realize actually, if I was participating in this in some way, then I really needed to take stock.
mm,
And
mm,
that participate, I really needed to come to the point of realization and acknowledgement of the part that I might be invariably playing. This was not about the fact that I created my own cancer. So I'm not at all saying that, because I've actually worked in cancer prevention as well. So I know the psychological impact that people have when they go through a journey like that. So that this is not at all me saying that, but it was just somehow seeing what the patterns are. And I happen to be really good at pattern recognition. And so
mm,
for me, it was the recognition that actually, unless I was ready to own my voice, and unless I was ready to actually step into my true self without giving my power away to everybody, that I was going to keep having these repeated, you know, experiences, which will just help amplify all of the fears, all of the imposter syndrome, all of the things that I was feeling along the way would just be amplified by me not actually being ready to own my own voice. And
mhm,
that meant, that looks like many different things. It can manifest as being whether you're confident on video. It can manifest as being, a fear of visibility, meaning, you yo-yo between being seen and not being seen, and being seen and not being seen. And you kind of do this hide and seek thing, with yourself, where
mhm,
you're oscillating constantly. And of course, when you're oscillating constantly and going up and down and up and down and up and down, usually it's kind of like a lifeline. The lifeline usually starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it dies out, because you've
mhm,
just burned yourself out through that yo-yoing constantly.
mm,
So for
mhm,
me, it was about finding my voice with the equilibrium, firstly, and then managing all of the symptoms that were presenting themselves. So the imposter syndrome, the not being able to speak clearly or from the heart, a fear of vulnerability, or feeling like you need to shrink if you see somebody else shining, right?
mhm. Yep.
All of those things really came down to the fact that I needed to get completely okay with my own voice and my own vision of where I was. And so that leads me to to where where came up with how to find your true voice. It
Yeah.
has been a journey. It has been a journey, and I do feel like, in the age of AI and all of the things that are all around us, I feel like the only thing that's actually going to get us through as as business owners, as people, as authors, as coaches, consultants, whoever you may be, whatever path you might be on, it really does just come down to that human connection and actually
Hmm.
connection with ourselves. So that's
Yeah.
my journey so far.
I love so much of what you said. Like, you are a warrior, you are so strong, and I am just so amazed at what you've been able to do. And I love that you talked about like the pattern, identifying those patterns by you kind of like held up a mirror to yourself and tried to
Yes.
figure out like, where, like you said, like where am I contributing to this? Not that, not that you're necessarily bullying yourself, although sometimes we do that, right? Like sometimes
We do.
we attach meaning to things and
Yeah.
we, are not the kindest to ourselves. But I
Yeah.
love that you made the intentional decision to look at yourself and try to
Mhm.
identify those patterns. And also, obsessed with the cliff edge, cliff face analogy. That is a very, very good way to put that because something like that doesn't happen overnight. It is,
No.
years and centuries and, eons
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
that erosion. And
Yes.
it's death by a thousand cuts. And we don't
Yes.
realize it's happening.
Yeah.
And then you look at yourself, you hold up that mirror to yourself, and you're like, where am I? Where did she go?
Mm. Mm.
And so I love again the intentionality of like, let me find her again. Let me, be who I am, like be my true self.
Yeah.
Um, and use that as my secret weapon, as my advantage, as my brand, as my everything, because like
Yeah.
we are our own currency. Like you said, you were talking about the street performing and, doing shows with your friends as kids and growing up and stuff. And you were like, oh, we're making something out of nothing. That's what we all do as entrepreneurs every day. Like
Yeah,
we have
exactly.
made something out of nothing with our business and we make something
Yeah.
out of nothing from no money to income,
Yeah.
from no course or no product or no service to launching stuff, opening stuff, doing stuff, building stuff, designing stuff, making stuff. So I
Yeah.
just think that so many folks will resonate with everything you just said.
Mm.
But talking about the visibility, voice, and confidence, kind of how that all works together. I know through your website and your content, you talk a lot about helping women find their true voice. And I
Yeah.
just wonder, like, what does that mean to you? Like,
Mm.
for women to find their true voice. Could you just
Yeah.
explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the best way to put it is basically bridging the gap between how you want to show up and all that you stand for.
Mm,
So, and I'll try and explain that a bit further, which is I know that, we live in the social media world, right? So, and if we're just talking about social media here for a minute,
hmm.
because there is the aspect of business building that also requires in-person shoulder tapping at times. It can look like, approaching corporates. It can look like a whole bunch of things. It can look like speaking on a podcast as an example. And
Hmm.
we want to be able to come across as being aligned. So what we say on our website, for instance, so the messaging and the copy and all of that kind of stuff, the marketing aspect of that really needs to translate into your voice so that when people speak to you, they feel like the person who they have seen on the website or the person that they have heard about on their emails or the person that they've seen in person and then online, maybe on a social media video, as an example, are all interconnected and the same person. So there isn't like this disjointed experience. And I think the main reason I mention this is because when I first started, I felt like because of my theater background that I needed to wear all of these masks. And so
Mm,
the theater came out in my content. It was actually almost kind of I didn't know any other way because, for me, being out on the world stage, which is essentially what social media is, you're putting yourself out on a virtual world stage where
Mm-hmm.
anyone can find you, right? You're speaking to millions at a time. Sure, there's the question of reach and all that, but we won't go down that rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that when you are speaking to your audience, the things that you want to say and that are in your head, they need to align so that what you are saying actually reflects how you're feeling. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you're feeling disjointed in some way about a certain topic, and someone might be sitting there going, but I actually don't know what to say because, I've got all of these, like I've done all of this stuff. And I'm mentioning that because I've been and experienced this myself. Someone might be in a corporate job right now, or someone might be transitioning. And they might be going, actually, I've got all of these experiences, but I just don't know how to put it all together that reflects who I am. And how do I differentiate myself from anyone else? And really, the true differentiator is ourselves. So we've heard this in
Right.
the online
Yeah.
world quite a lot, right? I mean, you can never teach somebody something, like you can. So we've heard that
Mm-hmm.
quite often. Like there's no one who can deliver something like you can. Well, what does that really mean? It means that what you're thinking and your life experiences, so life and professional experiences combined, and what you stand for in your life experiences combined with your professional experiences, then package them up to then be able to project your voice in a way that, explains everything that's going on in your head with how
Mm-hmm.
you want to communicate in the world in different instances. So on
Mm-hmm.
a podcast, it will be a lot more conversational. On social media, let's just say Instagram as an example, it will reflect your voice based on your visibility capacity. So not
Mm-hmm.
everybody wants to be, creating the kind of content that they might typically associate with Instagram. I was speaking to a coach friend, this was now about a couple of years ago, and she said that the mental imagery that she has of Instagram is like of two teenagers having a pillow fight on their bed and, in pink pajamas. And so
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so
Yeah.
there is this vision that we have of a particular platform, but there's
Mm-hmm.
a disconnect between how we want to show up. And so that disconnect represents as feeling stuck. So when
Mm-hmm.
we feel like we're stuck, there's a disconnect between how we want to show up and what we feel or the expectations are of that specific platform. If you take LinkedIn as an example, and again, we're only talking about social media here, but if we take LinkedIn as an example and we say, well, actually, there are so many other really smart people that are doing all of these incredible things. Like I'm connected on my own LinkedIn, I'm connected to some, literally rocket scientists through
Mm-hmm.
to doctors and everyone in between. And so, the expertise and the experience that they've built professionally can seem like they've done a lot more than, say, perhaps, an individual who's trying to create a business has done. And so then this creates, again, an expectation on ourselves of needing to be somehow matching up to their expertise because we are social people at the end of the day. We're always looking for clues on how
Mm-hmm.
we need to show up in the world in relation to the people around us. And so
Mm-hmm.
that also then creates a disconnect, and people go, well, actually, I don't know what to say that is going to make me look and show up in a way that will help me come across as credible. So
Yeah.
then there creates there's this dissonance, and then people end up feeling stuck, or that feeling of, but what if my industry peers, will judge me based on what I'm doing right now? Will
Mm-hmm.
there be, there's this feeling of absolute cringe, right? Like I am crumbling and cringing in my seat, just
Mm-hmm.
thinking about putting myself out there on
Right,
LinkedIn
right.
as an example, just using that as an example. And so this creates this dissonance between how we want to show up and what we think is expected of us. And actually, that comes down again to the experience most women have because we've been preconditioned into how we need to show up, what we need to say, how we need to come across, should we be pleasing people? And so this pleasing tendency follows us around in absolutely every single interaction that we have. And it
Mm-hmm.
actually further erodes, our natural voice. It further
Mm-hmm.
erodes how we feel because what we then put out there is indicative of what other people want to see. And so it's not authentic to us, which means that people don't resonate with it as much because you're not actually showing up in a way that's fully you. And
Mm-hmm.
so for people to then realize that, they have to go through the process of finding out how they want to show up first in the world, then followed by what do they stand for? And that's actually made up of your professional and life experiences. What do you stand for? What's your stand? And then the reason why you will keep going with your visibility is your deepest, darkest why. And everybody has a deepest, darkest why that is outside of, oh, but I want freedom and all of those kind of surface level things that
Mm-hmm.
people talk about. There's actually a much bigger, deeper, darker why that people haven't uncovered, which they need to uncover because it will stop them from the yo-yoing. It'll stop them from that, constantly feeling fatigued at the thought of what to say and how to put themselves out there and what are people going to think of me. And it is exhausting. It's
Yes, it
exhausting being
is.
yourself.
Yeah. Oh, it's exhausting being yourself. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Jeez.
yeah.
That is so good. I'm gonna make merch saying that. Um, but you're right. Like first of all, with the people pleasing thing, especially as women, I
Mm,
think so many of us as little kids, be polite and do the, like at least with me, I know I definitely was a people pleaser. And I'm
mm,
I'm the oldest sister as well. I'm the oldest kid, so a lot of
mm,
responsibility and all of that kind of stuff too. But I think it can't help but carry through through your career, through your entrepreneurship, through your adulthood, all of that kind of stuff. And
yeah.
you don't, again, to use that cliff face analogy, which is so great, it's like you don't realize it's happening. You don't realize how ingrained those tendencies are in you.
They
But
are.
also, I think it's really, I love what you said about, what do you stand for and having that be part of your true voice because I hear this a lot from my subscribers, from my course students, my clients even. Um, so many of the folks in my audience have very strong opinions, have very strong values, beliefs, likes and dislikes, like all that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
causes that they support, and like I said, values and a mission that they're on, and yet actually declaring that and working that into stuff and calling it out and making it part of the brand is a challenge. Some of
Is
them it's like, yes, I'm ready, like I'm putting it out there, and then others it's harder to get them to kind of cross over and start to incorporate that. And my personal
mm,
take is, if there are things that, whether it's your style, your tone of voice, or like bigger issues like global issues and, politics or whatever, like if there are things that you believe in and
mm,
that are so important to you, and you're afraid to put that out there because it might offend somebody or something like that, why would you want to work with those folks anyway? That's my take.
mm, mm,
And it's like, the freedom to be myself and put myself out there in that way is so that's so valuable and important to me. And so I
yeah.
guess what I'm wondering is, why do you think so many women, especially solopreneurs, um, struggle with that? And also just struggle with the belief that they deserve to be seen and heard in their business,
Mm,
in
mm.
bringing their full self into that. Why do you think that that's like such a thing?
Yeah, look, I think this has certainly not been my personal journey because I think most people have got some background of people pleasing, which I don't have.
Okay.
So it's been an observation that I have made, which I have seen in people, which
Okay.
is that they have got a history of people pleasing based on their childhood. So the need,
Hmm.
the need to sort of present yourself in a certain way, for example, having that expectation of us to present ourselves in a certain way, as you said, is deeply ingrained. And so if it's deeply ingrained, then it actually requires unlearning of a lot of the things that we are already pre-programmed for. And
Hmm.
so, for me, that actually started as when I moved into womanhood. So as a girl, I didn't have that because I grew up in an environment that was incredibly free. So,
Hmm.
my mum, for instance, she used to let me draw on the walls at home.
Hmm.
I used to have, we lived in a really small apartment. And so the only way of making any kind of fun was to make my own fun. And so we used to get this talcum powder back in the day, and I'd put it all over the floor of the house, and I'd skate on it because there wasn't a
Hmm.
skating, just with my feet.
That's fun.
Yes. Yeah. So I think I mean that's just an example, but really what I'm trying to hint at is that I wasn't expected to do a lot of the things that most other people were. And
Hmm.
so that brought along with it a certain degree of freedom. But what I've observed is as people move into adulthood, as people move into professional lives, there is more and more, and I mean, we're seeing this more today than any other time. We live in a highly patriarchal society.
Hmm.
Even our social media algorithms are actually very structured. And
Hmm.
so, as women, we're meant to be flowing, as so if I bring a femininity angle to it, if we're flowing and if we're meant to be flowing and if we are if our true selves aren't necessarily these structured pillars of what people expect us to be, right? And if we
Hmm.
put ourselves into structured environments, such as algorithms, right? Such as, say, being in a corporate role where you're expected to toe the line and say
Right.
certain things in order to
Yep.
please people, right? That's again a
Following the rules.
representation. Yeah, following the rules, exactly. It's
Yep.
the representation of a much deeper issue, which is that it is anti-flow, right? So if we're flowing, and I'm just using really big concepts here, just that if we're meant to be flowing, and if you can't flow if you're constricted, and if there's
Yeah.
any part of you that's constricted, that will show up as all of these representations that you see. It'll show up as imposter syndrome, it'll show up as all of these things. So I think it's important for women to realize that actually for us to flow, not only as women, but as business owners, as whatever, as self-published authors in some cases, we're
Hmm.
putting our life's work and it's a flow that we've created. It's even in business, it's a flow that we've created. And a lot of our, programs, etc., might be structured to show up in an environment that has been designed in a structured way, right? But that is what we need to realize is that marketing is actually a structured play, but the flow that needs to happen on the back end needs to be you. Because
Mm.
if people don't, if the representation of you isn't featured in the structured walls, whether that be landing pages, whether that, all of those things, it's not going to come across as being your authentic self. And so therefore there'll be a disconnect. And so if there's a disconnect, we feel rejected, right? Because people
Right.
don't pick up our things or people don't um, say yes to whatever it is, or people don't like our social media posts, or no one comments on something, right? So
Yeah.
the representation of that is just amplified through a loop that happens with rejection. And so to get past that rejection, to get past the structured walls, we really have to allow ourselves to firstly flow no matter what happens. And obviously to flow with no matter what happens, you have to be really aligned and know that having speaking from a place of truth and being
Hmm.
more of yourself is the only way to be. because anything else, and you're just trying to be somebody else, and that's not going to
Hmm.
work.
It's
That's
not
not
because
going
it's
to,
false advertisement.
yes.
It's
Yeah.
like it's you're not it's we all hate false advertising, and then when
Yeah.
you're doing it yourself you're like, "Oh shit." Um and I think just for those listening, what Radhika's saying about when you're feeling that imposter syndrome or when you're feeling those little things bubbling up, those are indicators to know that you are not flowing right now. Like something is
Mm.
blocking, and it's just something to be aware of. It's something to like take a pause, like let me hold up that mirror to myself. What is going on? What like so I've been in therapy for a couple years, and something that has helped me so much with anxiety and just, different things is what is the actual reason I'm upset
Mm.
or triggered or whatever? What is the feeling behind it? Because it's never the
Mm.
actual like outward situation or object or statement. It's like, what is the feeling behind it?
Yeah.
And I think that correlates to what you're saying as well.
Yeah.
And it's a good indicator. It's a good way to check in with ourselves and know, like, oh, okay, alert, something is throwing me out of my alignment.
That's right.
And maybe take some notes at that point and journal a little bit and try to, think about it.
Yeah.
Um, and I wonder too, like when it comes, like you were saying about earlier, you were saying about, struggling with being confident on video, for example. Like I was thinking
Mm.
of prior to our chat, I was thinking maybe we could talk about what are some common misconceptions people might have about what it means to be a good speaker. But I think that
Mm.
that could translate out to not just necessarily like giving a TED talk or being on a podcast, but just a
Yes.
simple like, I'm going to do a Facebook Live or I'm going to
Yeah.
do, an Instagram reel. I'm going to talk to the
Yeah.
camera, but like
Yeah.
I feel a certain kind of way about that. And I
Yes.
don't, I'm nervous and I don't know what to say and I'm gonna be, you know, I have to be all done up and I have to have it totally scripted. Like, could you talk us through a little bit about just what it means to be more
Mm.
confident in speaking,
Mm.
whether that's on camera, on a podcast, on a TV show,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I would say to that is, firstly, if it's something as so if it's something like maybe putting yourself out there on video as an example, on a Facebook
Mm-hmm.
Live or whatever, I would say start from a place of ease. I think it's more important to actually put yourself out there in some way than holding yourself back because you want it to look perfect, right?
Yeah.
So it could be that you want to maybe have a talking head reel, which is essentially you talking on camera on, in a 1 minute video or thereabouts, right? And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so if that feels like a really big stretch, start with something smaller. Start with maybe some B-roll content, and train yourself on the back end to start being able to hold your voice. So, for example, something that I did much earlier on, this comes from my theater background, is that I spoke to myself. I actually literally spoke to myself in the mirror because I
Mm-hmm.
needed to see myself speak. So, a mirror is only going to catch you speaking to yourself. And so there's no recording, firstly. So I did
Right.
that for 5 days. So I spoke to myself in the mirror for about 20 seconds. Like I just decided to make up a script and I spoke to that script every single day for 5 days. Then you can transition to speaking to a camera, in on your phone for 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
So just record yourself and look at, how you've done on day one and then how you are on day five. Then if visibility is a really big lift, you can show it to somebody else and ask them to, someone close to you, ask them to mention what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
thirdly, if you are so inclined after doing all of that, you might just be, feeling brave enough to rip the band-aid off and do
Mm-hmm.
a video that is going to be short and simple. So if you've created a small script for yourself, it could just be 5 fun facts about me that you didn't know. Hey folks, there's 5 fun facts about me you didn't know. My nickname is Rad. I'm just gonna, I did speech and drama in whatever, blah, blah, blah. My friends call me X, Y, and Z and something else, right? You can just easily make up 5 fun facts about yourself. It could be just as simple as that, you know,
Hmm.
and do that and get started. So, there are many different ways in which people can train themselves to speak in different formats, but I think the biggest takeaway really is start from a place of ease. Start with something that feels easy first rather than, trying to bite off more than what you can chew, really. Um,
Hmm.
so that would be my
I
recommendation for that.
love I love that because, first of all, extremely actionable. All of us can do that right now. And I
Yeah.
love too that you made it like when you're talking about coming from starting with a place of ease, you made it immediately less scary because we did not start with the camera.
Yeah,
We start
that's
with the
right.
mirror again. We're talking, this is the third time
Yeah.
we're talking about a mirror.
A
Everyone needs to get a
mirror.
mirror and keep a mirror at their desk because we're going to need it a lot in our entrepreneurial journey, okay? But I love that you're like, okay, forget the friggin' camera. We're going to start with just talking to the mirror. And that is very easy. Everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Then, like you said, and you're only doing, 30 seconds at a time, whatever. Then, like you're saying, okay, now I'm going to film myself. I'm not going to send it to anybody. I'm not going to post it. I'm just filming it and I'm gonna watch it back and I'm
Yeah.
gonna, learn from it. And to do that for 5 days. It's almost like, when people sign up for like the mini challenges, the email challenges. This is like a little challenge we can do ourselves.
Yeah, do
These
ourselves.
5 days,
Exactly.
these 5 days we're gonna do this mirror mission, and then the next 5 days we're gonna do this camera thing, and then like you said, okay, now I'm going to send this to a friend or a colleague or a client or a sibling or a loved one or something to get their feedback, like whatever. And then, like you're saying, once you've done that, you're going to feel so much more comfortable and confident when you haven't been doing it at all. I believe
Yeah.
there'd be plenty of people who would be willing to rip off the band-aid at that point. And of course, there's
Yes.
folks that would struggle still, where they're
Yeah.
feeling like, I know for me, like, I'm much better with it now, but in the beginning,
Yeah.
when I was going to, whether it was a live or whether it was just a video that I would film and then post, I would get on camera and freeze. Like I would
Yeah.
just totally freeze.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why can't I do this? It was just some sort of mental block.
Yeah.
And one day, it was for me, it was just cold turkey. I just was like, I
Mm.
don't care. I'm just doing this and I'm not going to attach meaning to it. I'm not going
Yeah.
to predetermine anything. There was a quote I shared in a recent podcast episode that said, why are we booing ourselves off stage before we've even had anyone's even had a chance to see us perform? Like
Yes.
we're
That's
beating
so good.
ourselves up. We're prejudging ourselves. And so I just love all those tips that you shared because I feel like they're a very gentle way to dip your toes
Yeah.
into being more visible without feeling totally overwhelmed. Um,
Exactly.
and also, like, I think, you know, with the way that social media is right now, of course, like video is like very big, AI is big, all that kind of stuff. I think more and more folks are realizing they need to or should be incorporating more video in many, that can mean many different ways, many different
Yeah.
tactics for doing so. But what would you say about folks who might feel like they have to perform or be on all the time? How does that like
Mm.
correlate with that true voice that we're talking about? Like where you're
Mm.
you're putting yourself out there, but
Mm.
you're also wanting to get reactions and engagement and have true conversation. And I don't know, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I do, because it's something that I have struggled with myself in the past.
Hmm.
Um, I think the big thing too, firstly, for people to understand is that you don't have to be on all the time.
Hmm.
So that is one thing that I will say, and I
Good.
know that it will feel like almost kind of contrary to what most people hear, which is about being consistent and showing up and all that. I think people take different meanings from what they hear in the online space about consistency and about showing up. So
Hmm.
firstly, my advice would be to actually give yourself the attention. So
Hmm.
stop giving attention to what other people are saying and actually really pay attention to your own intentions, which
Hmm.
is, what is it that you're trying to do? Because if you wanted to create video just for the sake of creating video and for people to like it, but you're not going to see anything on the back end of it, then why are you even doing it?
Hmm.
Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there
Yep.
needs to
Yep.
be an intention behind getting attention. So if you're wanting attention, you need to know what that intention is, because just showing up for the sake of showing up is just a complete waste of time. And I'm saying that because I've done it, right? I have
I've
done
done
it
it too.
all.
I have done it too. Yep.
Yep. And so, whether it's creating content every day because you feel like you want to have, I don't know, growth on your Instagram, or if you want to grow your LinkedIn, if you want to grow your TikTok, or whatever that might be, right? I guess the question to ask is that your intention? Or is your intention to make money in your business?
Mhm. Mhm.
You
That'd be
can either
nice.
create, yeah, you can either use your true voice to create content for building a pipeline, or you can create content using your true voice to bring in sales.
Hmm.
And there's a big difference to both of those intentions. And so, and you need a bit of both, of course, you need a bit of
Sure.
both,
Yeah.
um, but really outlining what it is that you need to do, really. I think it's your overall strategy. I think that's more a strategy play. That's more of a marketing play than really like that's like two steps ahead of where people will be with, actually finding out how they need to be. So I think, the essence of showing up consistently, yes, that's true, but you can only show up consistently if you know what you're swimming towards.
Hmm.
Otherwise you're just in a boat, like a rudderless boat bobbing around
Yeah.
and hoping that the tides will kind of, drift you somewhere, and but you might find yourself in the middle of the big wide ocean, not having
Right.
any land, to
Hmm.
actually row towards. So it's about firstly building in little islands of success for yourself, so that if you do have a boat and you do want to, and if you're in a rowboat, that you know what that first little island is, and that you can see the island in a short distance away. You know it's going to be achievable, and you know exactly what you're wanting to achieve from that. And so
Hmm.
rowing towards that rather than kind of going, I'm going to jump into this marathon and I'm going to, swim and bike and run and do all of these things
Yep.
all at once, not actually knowing what target you're hitting. And so you're going to miss
Yeah.
every single one of them.
Yes, yes. This is so helpful for me to hear as well, because I'm going to be heading into my next course launch soon and a couple other things. And
Mm.
yeah, I have absolutely been guilty of, oh shit, I didn't post today. Let me get something out. And even though I might have the best laid plans and, I have content planned out and stuff, sometimes it falls by the wayside. Life's, and, you
Yeah.
fall off the wagon. Um, but I love what you're saying about intention, about figuring out what your objective is so that you can
Mm.
get yourself there. Because otherwise,
Yeah.
like, what is that saying? Like, a dream without a plan is just a wish
Right.
or whatever. I forget how
Yeah,
it
yeah,
says,
that's
but
that's a good
you
one. Yeah,
know,
you're right.
and as somebody who is a visual learner, I very much appreciate your analogies that you're including in this episode for us. I love
Yeah.
picturing the rowboat and the little islands. That's very helpful for my brain.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like I think, sometimes we're spinning our wheels. I have so many listeners who, we're multi-hyphenates, we're creatives, we're Renaissance women. We wear a million hats. We're solopreneurs doing
Mm.
all the things.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you're like, I got to get something out there, but you're not really thinking about, but what is the reason? What am I working towards? What is my intention behind the thing? Because I
Yeah.
think what you're saying about, your true voice, that can certainly help in so many other parts of business, like your messaging, networking opportunities, pricing your offers,
Mm.
designing graphics and sales pages and courses and videos and all that kind of stuff. I feel like it
Yeah.
is so powerful to be able
Yeah.
to, pull through all of that stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
and I love to, you had said at one point, I forget if it was on your website, but I saw somewhere that you said our voices can be healed. Um,
Yes.
I really loved that. And what do you mean by that?
So our voices can be healed in many different ways and many different formats, and is actually a really big core part of what I do with women. So um, it's a mixture of behavior change. So I've got a background in behavior change. I actually worked in the cancer prevention space for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my work was around positive behavioral psychology, really, and bringing that into messaging, bringing that into how, eliciting behavior change within people. And
Mm-hmm.
so a big part of what I do is I blend elements of exposure therapy. So there's blends of exposure therapy combined with actually firstly finding your true voice, then activating your true voice before you can amplify your true voice.
Hmm.
And so there is a process that people go through, which is the healing part, which is firstly understanding what's holding you back. And this is not therapy at all. This is about very much with a view towards the future. This is very much about visioning. This is very much about getting really, really, really clear about what your true voice is and how does that relate to your vision, whatever it is that you're building, right, within the context of building a business. Because obviously your true voice needs to be aligned with whatever it is that you're creating, well, at any given point in time. And so firstly, getting clear about what your true voice is by resolving some of the things you know, that by acknowledging some of the things that have happened in the past and realize actually I have had 20 years, 40 years, whatever experience of all of these various different things that have happened. And there is the acknowledgement part, because once you acknowledge something, it's a lot easier to actually go forward and decide what you're going to do with it, right?
Oh
And
yeah,
so there
definitely.
is
Mm-hmm.
there is that part, that aspect of it. But then there is the skill building and the knowledge. So about how to do things. How do
Mm-hmm.
I create a video, a talking head video, for example, that helps me speak with ease, that helps me come across as my true self, where I can hold my face on camera. How do I even show up, as an example, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
it could be, how do I stand out from other people? So let's say I'm a home organizer and I'm in a sea of other home organizers. How can I show up in a way that doesn't erode from my own personal experience, and where I can hold my story in a way that doesn't take away from the work that I'm doing? Because it's one thing to have your story, right? But it's another thing for people to actually understand what it is that you do, which comes back to the previous point that you were talking about, which is, are you talking about your story, and is that story more for yourself or is that for your audience, right?
Mm. Oh, you just said a mouthful there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is that aspect of it, which is, how do you heal yourself so that your story doesn't become the thing that holds you back,
Mm-hmm.
and that your story actually ends up being the amplifier for taking that next step,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
right? So there is that
Yeah.
aspect of it. And then there is the doing aspect of it, which is the exposure therapy, which is, the elements of exposure therapy, which is, how can you flood yourself in a certain situation and expand your circle of safety, and,
Mm-hmm.
heal your voice in that way. And it is a capacity building exercise. It's not something that you can kind of, you know, you can make progress within 6 weeks, right? And see milestones within 6 weeks. And then
Mm-hmm.
your next stage of the journey starts from there, because as entrepreneurs, we're up leveling the level of fear that we can hold in ourselves in many different ways and formats, right? So, but the visibility aspect of it is really one big crucial aspect of it, because without that, you really can't fully be yourself. And if you can't fully be yourself, you can't show up in a way in which people can be attracted to you, rather than you feeling like you're constantly chasing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, there is that aspect of it as well. And so the whole journey about healing is basically how to go from chasing to start attracting,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that chasing might look like. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so there is that aspect of it, and that's how people can heal themselves.
That's so interesting. And to think of it in that order or like that, succession of first you have to do this, then you can do
Yeah.
this, and then you can do that.
Yeah.
And I know that you have a guide, a free guide to help
Yeah.
people with this too. Could you tell us a little bit about that
Yes.
guide? I'm going to put the link in the show notes, but tell us about it.
Absolutely. So this guide is called How to Amplify Your Voice and Start Being More of Yourself so you can start attracting and stop chasing.
Hmm.
And it's going to give people the exact thing that they need to do. So 20 ways in which finding their true voice is going to help them, firstly. And what that really means in terms of taking those 20 ways and then finding out exactly what they need in order to for them to make the first steps towards finding their voice. So, what is it that they need to do in order to identify the top three priorities that they have in order
Hmm.
to align their vision with their voice. So if they've ever wondered, well, actually, you know what? I kind of have a vague idea of what I want to say, perhaps, but I still shrink and I still remain hidden. Well, this guide is going to help you get reacquainted with what exactly you need to do and focus on so that you can start attracting and stop chasing by aligning your voice and vision together. And so it gives people an idea of how to exactly, what steps they need to do to find their voice and how finding their voice is going to help them in 20 different ways, and then
Hmm.
aligning their vision so that when they actually do go out there, that they can start amplifying from a place of ease.
I love it. I love it. And it's cool because if you're listening to this episode, Radhika just kind of talked through and walked you through some of these concepts and what you could try. And now you can get the download the guide and actually do the work, do the homework, and go through the experience. So I love that. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. But if you're listening, you're going to head to contenthalo.com/magnetic and you'll be able to grab the guide there. I am definitely going to grab that myself because I need these tips. It's so helpful to have. It's funny. It's like you want the outward the outward perspective, from somebody else, but you actually then have to go back to the mirror to,
Yes.
find your true voice. But it's someone like you helping us figure
Yeah.
out what we need to do.
Yeah.
What do we need to consider? What do we need to question? What do we need to shift? And those
Mhm.
types of things. And it takes sometimes somebody on the outside to help us hold up that mirror so
Yeah.
that we can make those changes. So that's going to be really, really helpful to everybody. So thank you for providing that and letting us grab that.
So
Um,
welcome.
so talking a little bit too about the work that you do with your clients, could you talk a bit about what kinds of clients or what stages of business you really love
Mm.
working with the most, and
Mm.
what kinds of projects you like to work on with your
Mm.
clients?
Mm. Yeah, so there are essentially three ways in which I work with people. And I
Hmm.
wouldn't say that there's any one specific stage of a business owner that I like to work with because I've worked with people from across various different walks of life. So some people are just starting out, but they may have had a corporate career that they've walked away from,
Hmm.
and they might find themselves at the crossroads of not knowing exactly how to package up their life experiences. And so the way in which I would work with the people who actually want to package up their life experiences, they want to package up, how what they stand for, which is basically finding their true voice, and then helping them create the actual assets for them to whether they want to go out and get a TEDx talk, because quite a few of the people that I work with have been, in some cases they've been therapists, lawyers,
Hmm.
people with quite senior professional experiences, and they would like to be able to speak about their topic in a way that helps amplify their visibility. And so what I'll help them do is I'll actually firstly create a framework for them that they can use based on off of their true voice. So we first find their true voice, then we help from that true voice, we actually create a framework that reflects their true voice. And after the framework, we create a bunch of assets, like literally video assets and written posts and things like that, so that they've got a visibility toolkit almost that they've, that
Mm,
they've now
nice.
got, that
Yeah.
they can then go to the next step, whether that be, the marketing aspect of things, and go and do that. And so
Mm-hmm.
there is that angle. The second way in which I will work with people is for anyone who doesn't necessarily want to package up their services, but actually they just need help with navigating how to find their true voice and then how to amplify their true voice. So it might be somebody who's an established business owner who already has either a professional services based business. So it could be in any format. It could be marketing, it could be legal services, it could be consulting, coaching, whatever. But what they're really wanting is, they might have all of their packages and everything already done, but what they're really wanting is that segue between what do they actually stand for and how do they show up in this world so they can amplify their presence and take it to the next level. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is the second type of person that I will work with, which is, really getting to the core of what their true voice is, and then helping them to basically tell their story in a way that helps them to put their story in a bucket on the other side, which isn't the story that people need to hear, and then morph that story in multiple ways, in the 20 different ways that they can show up, and making it really fluid and help them flow so that it suddenly starts attracting a much bigger audience,
Mm,
because you're able to speak about your topics in multiple ways and draw people in. And so I
mm-hmm.
help them do that. And obviously there is elements of the healing, which I've talked about. So,
Mm-hmm.
being able to hold your vulnerability on video, being able to hold your voice in ways where you allow yourself to be heard in different places and spaces.
Mm-hmm.
It's about injecting how you want to live your life that is aligned with your business. So, what are the steps that you need to do in order to facilitate your true voice and to amplify your true voice? So, what are the exact steps that you need to take? Who do you need to be involved with? What kind of, coaches and consultants are going to help you with, propelling you to the other side
Mm-hmm.
after you've found your true voice? Or it could be actions that you need to take. Do you need to take that swimming class? Do you need to work towards, an example I use is that I often see myself, I envision myself wearing a gray top with white pants and a really bold necklace. Right? If that's my vision, then how are you going to amplify your voice by walking towards that as well? But very much
Mm,
grounded in a way that's going to be beneficial to your business. So it's a holistic way in which you show up in the world so that
mm-hmm.
your true essence reflects in your voice based on the things that you're doing outside of just your business. Because I think as business owners, we can get buried in our chairs in front of a laptop
Mm-hmm.
and stop doing other things at times.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's really about self-love and putting it back into yourself so that whatever it is that you're reflecting, whether you're creating content on social media, actually reflects the life you actually want from the business that you're creating, right? So there's alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is that aspect. And then the third type of person that I would work with is somebody who simply wants to know where to start.
Mm,
Now, how do I start putting myself out there? What do I need to do? The actual, what buttons do I need to press on the video to make amazing content for myself? How do
mm-hmm.
I talk about what it is that I'm doing in a way that's aligned with my true voice? And this is not about going viral or any of those things. This
Right.
is simply about you being able to articulate yourself in a way that helps you get started. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the third type of person that I work with. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's something for everyone in the services that I offer. And I honestly can say that I have loved working with every single person that has come through and done the work with me. I mean, I had recently had somebody who, walked away from a corporate career, and she ended up finding her true voice, putting herself out there despite having massive anxiety about doing so, and ended up landing
Yeah.
her first client with one post.
Amazing. Love
Yeah.
it.
So
That's
that's the power
awesome.
of finding your true voice. So you don't,
Mm-hmm.
to your earlier question, which is how can you show up consistently? Well, this lady didn't show up consistently at all. This was her very first post, which which helped her land her first client.
Mm-hmm.
So that there is true power in finding your true voice because that client happened to be a corporate client. And now she's ended up getting recurring revenue on the back of that. So um,
Amazing.
yeah. And then for someone starting out, who simply just wanted to know how to make themselves visible. So she was a lawyer, so quite a serious profession, and a lot of and she'd gotten up to the partner level almost, so quite high
Mm-hmm.
up in the firm, and she wanted to show up in a way that could actually help explain to people. So this was about her business was about helping retirees with making the right choice for finding a retirement village that actually matched, their lifestyle. But
Okay.
all the considerations that they needed to factor in before they were ready to take the plunge. So, what things did they need to factor? What kind of family dynamics did they need to factor in? People who wanted to kind of, I don't know, get their money after they sold their house in some cases with their
Mm-hmm.
children,
Mm-hmm.
all of that. So she was navigating some pretty tricky, challenging situations. And so for her, it was really just knowing how do I show up in a way on video, in posts, in different formats that will help people understand why they need to take up my services without delaying them any further. 10 days in, she ended up getting a 5K client. So, this is the power of finding your true voice and actually aligning yourself without necessarily being on all the time so that you
Mm-hmm.
can literally start attracting and stop chasing.
Obsessed. Obsessed. I love it so much. And like I said before, I have been guilty of that not moving forward with intention, just kind of throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks and all of that. Even though like I have a social media course where I teach people about, some of these concepts and stuff, it's kind of like the cobbler's kids have no shoes.
Mm,
And we fall into those patterns sometimes, but I know for sure I am going to grab your guide because I have talked about, who I am and what I do and who I serve and all that stuff. It has changed a million times over the 8 years that I've been in
yes.
business.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like I change it every quarter because I'm trying to find it still, honestly.
Yes.
Because,
Yeah.
many of us are, like I said before, we're multi-hyphenates, we're doing, a variety of things.
Yeah.
And trying to sum it up in a nice little elevator pitch
Yeah.
where you can kind of make it clear to everybody is a challenge. So I'm really excited to grab your guide. I know that's going to help me, and I think it's going to help my audience too. So thank you again so much for
You are so welcome, and I'm so excited for people to get this guide because it truly is the way in which, in marketing speaking, the way in which you can position yourself, because that
hmm
positioning is so important in order for people to stand out, firstly, but
Right.
feel so aligned with who they are. I'm so passionate about it, so I really do hope that people take it up because, yeah, it's as one person called it, it's the difference between building a business on solid foundations versus a house of cards.
There we go. Amen to that. That was great. Thank you so much, Radhika. I really know that so many of the folks in my audience are going to have so many takeaways from this conversation. I do too. Remember, everyone needs to get a mirror and keep it on their desk. But I love the tips you gave. And I know that it's going to help us feel more confident the next time that we have to write something, film something, post something, think through something. And it all starts with ourselves, just kind of questioning ourselves, going inward and starting to have a conversation with ourselves. So thank you so, so much for all of these great tips and information. Everyone listening, you can head to the show notes to grab the link for Radhika's freebie, and to find how you can work with her and find her on social, find her website and all the things. Oh, and we didn't talk about too, you have a podcast. Tell us about your
Yes, I do.
podcast.
I do. So my podcast is called Hidden to Heard. And it is for people to find out how they can build their pre-visibility foundations.
Hmm.
How do you go from being hidden to being heard in a way which starts from the ground up? So building your pre-visibility foundation so you can be seen and heard. And actually, I'm going to be starting a new series for my Hidden to Heard podcast, which will be featuring people who have done amazing things with putting themselves out there and what they did in order to get the success that they did, and
Awesome.
in a way in which people can actually get some insights on different ways of which being able to do things. So yeah, so that's a little bit about that podcast. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. So check out her podcast as well. And I'm so excited to have finally met you face to face and have some FaceTime with you. This is a great episode. Thank you again so much for being on. And I will stay tuned of all the stuff that you've got offering or all the stuff that you offer. I think it's really, really helpful. So thank you again for being here.
Yeah. Thanks, Alicia.
Talk soon.